vote 36 on the appropriation accounts. There was a slight excess on the outturn on the purchase of military transport. And I note that an excess arose due to requirements to purchase additional military vehicles. I also note that the replacement of heavy armoured cars and troops transporters is planned by the Department. Now, I asked the Taoiseach before Christmas in respect to this. Could you, Mr Quinn, take me through that process? Because there has been a disenchantment with the tender competitions run by the Department. There is one of the world's leading companies in designing and developing light armoured vehicles in Ireland and Timony Technologies, yet they can't get a simple engagement with the Department to illustrate how they could serve our armed forces and this nation. They are a leading manufacturer. I mention them in particular because we are a very small nation, and this is a company engaged by the Australian military and by others across. And I just would very much appreciate if you could make a statement in terms of the tender process that would allow for engagement, just simple engagement, and in particular in this particular country, to illustrate how they could best serve our nation.
The normal process that we follow in the Department of Defence for procurement is open tender. That's the standard practice. We're also doing a lot of work on support to enterprise arising out of the White Paper and decisions that were taken earlier. With regard to there's a whole range of vehicles that we're procuring in the period ahead. And I'll come back to the MOAGs. There's the armoured logistical vehicles, armoured utility vehicles. Not to labour the point, but the nature of our overseas deployments is such now that where troops are deployed in armoured personnel carriers, the vehicles supporting them also need to be armoured. So we're doing a lot of work on that at the moment. With regards to the upgrade of the 80 armoured personnel carriers we have, original equipment provided by MOAG, there was a very long process followed within the organisation to bottom out on what was the most appropriate way of ensuring that capability, that armoured capability was available to the Defence Forces into the future. We had 80 of these vehicles starting back in 2003, I think. And the outcome of all of that was that the nature of the work that was required to be done on the vehicles meant that we needed to deal with, on a sole source basis, with the original equipment provider. And that was the contract that we awarded shortly before Christmas to GDELS, for the work to be done on our armoured personnel carriers. And of course that's what 15 accounts.
Chairman, in respect to that, again I would ask, just in terms of, and I have obviously mentioned a particular company, and because this is a very small country, there are not many within this country that engage in these particular services. Mr Quinn mentioned the White Paper. I know Minister Coveney, when he was Minister for the Defence, visited this particular operation. Minister Bruton, in his capacity as Minister for Enterprise, visited this operation. They are recognised as a world-renowned leader in the supply of the suspensions for these particular vehicles as well. And I'm simply asking, in terms of the engagement, the simple aspect of engagement, how a company can illustrate and demonstrate to the Department of Defence that they are able to actually meet the criteria which you have set out. And indeed, the Taoiseach, in his response to me at the time, said they were monitoring constantly in the context of having proper equipment for our Defence Forces. He discussed the question of resources to the Department of Defence, and it was agreed with the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform that these will be examined carefully. And he said he hoped the Defence Forces would never be sent out with inadequate or inferior equipment. It's a hell of a statement by the Taoiseach, because certainly a company based in Navan in County Meath that is supplying hundreds of vehicles to the Australian Army, to the US Army and others across the continent, That was quite a profound statement by the Taoiseach that he later clarified as well. So I just would ask again, in terms of the willingness of the department to actually engage for this process of actually purchasing equipment and dealing with Irish companies.
We were aware of the company in question
and had previously worked with the department going back to the 70s.
Correct. When it came to the specific contract that we're talking about here, the first task was to establish the scope of works required to extend the life of our armoured personnel carrier fleet. And what we're doing is up-armouring them and changing the protection against explosive ordnance, changing the weapon station, and working on the manoeuvrability of them. So
which would require alterations to suspensions as well.
Well, as it transpired in the scope of work for the tender, there is no change to the drivetrain or the suspensions. And given, for example, the warranty and the warranty that we need to have when the job is done, and the nature of the work that was required, that's what led us back to the original equipment manufacturer and for a sole source contract. In the end, that's how the process went through.
Just finally, Mr. Quinn, notwithstanding an open tender process, I'm just asking again, is there a willingness in the department to engage, to be open to listening to the capabilities of firms and what they can do ahead of those tendering processes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. Next, we appreciate that.